Hi friends, welcome to Krako's video series. In this particular video, we'll be discussing the XAT exam, how exactly to prepare for it, what to expect in the XAT exam, its format, everything. We'll be covering all the information that you should know before you even start preparing for the XAT exam. So let's get started. I'm Saili Kale. I'm one of the founders of Krako. So let's get started. So firstly, what about the XAT exam? Before we begin, let's take a look at the important dates that you should keep in mind as you start preparing. So for XAT 2023, that is in January of 2023, these are the important dates. Now the second thing is you will get the admit card from December 20th. Basically, then you will know exactly where you have to take the exam. Generally, the format of the exam is that it would be there on the first or second Sunday of the year. Generally, what happens, and this is something that I know from experience, if Jan 8 is the day of the exam, the CAT results generally come out one day earlier on Jan 7 or something of that sort. So please make sure that you have done all your preparation beforehand, because on Jan 7th you might be busy with other things, seeing your results, etc. You might not be in the mental state to actually finish your preparation. So I would say Jan 8 is the exam. So either don't see the CAT result on the CAT day, which most people won't do, but at least finish all your preparation by Jan 6. So on Jan 7, even if the results come out, you will be in the mental state to actually give the exam by Jan 8 as such. With that, mostly by the end of the month, so this is roughly Jan 31st when the result will come out. The Jan 31st is likely the last day by which it should come. It generally comes in the last week of January sometime. Now, the second thing that you have to keep in mind is this exam is slightly different from CAT. In CAT, you have sectional time limits, you have 3 sections. This is slightly different. So, firstly, you have 2 parts to it. So, you have 180 minutes part where you have to solve 100 questions. And then you have a 10-minute test to write a essay. Okay. Now, in these 180 minutes, that is 3 hours, you have to solve 100 questions. You can spend as much time as you want in each section. There is no sectional time limit as such. So, if you are somebody who struggles with quant section and doesn't get to finish the quant section, or who struggles in verbal section and can't read all the RCs properly, but can finish the other section quickly. So this exam is to your advantage, because then you can decide how you want to actually spend the time. You can decide to spend more time in a particular section and less time in another section, and so on. So remember, there are 100 questions, 180 minutes, that is 3 hours, and there is one essay question that you have to do in the remaining 10 minutes. Okay. So the marking scheme, since there are 5 options, right? Since there are 5 options, it is +1 and -0.25, that is -1/4. So basically, in this case, if you have +1 and -0.25, I would suggest guessing is less punitive in this case, rather than when you have +1, when you have -1/3, it is more punitive in a way, because every mistake counts for much more. Also, another reason why you should try to guess a few answers if possible is that after like 8 unattempted questions, there is a standard penalty of -0.1. So again, if you have left a lot of unattempted questions also, it is going to actually hurt you. So I would suggest that even if you're not sure of the answer, try to mark off as many answers as possible, and try to leave only 8 questions as such which you are absolutely have no idea about. Otherwise, try to attempt as much of these 100 questions as possible. There is no negative marking in the GK question, so attempt every single question from the GK question. There is 0 negative marking. So those 8 unattempted questions should not come from the GK question, GK section at least. That should definitely be the case. Every single question from the GK section should be attempted. From the remaining 75 questions that you have, right? As much as possible, don't leave things unattempted. As much as possible, try to attempt. Only when you feel that you have absolutely no clue, only then leave it at unattempted, and keep a track of how many you have left unattempted. You can see in the how many total you have left unattempted. In general, do not leave a lot of questions unattempted as such. Okay, so remember, there is a penalty for unattempted questions also. Beyond 8 questions left unattempted, you will get a -0.1 mark. The reason for that also, I'll come to it later. The reason for that is basically low cutoffs. So basically, I'll tell you the different sections, but overall, so you have like, if you can't forget GK for a minute, what comes in shortlisting is the 75 marks of the non-GK sections. So of that, if you get even 38 plus out of those 75, generally that should be enough, more than enough to actually get a XLRI call. That would be 99.5 percentile plus, and that should be enough to get an XLRI call, which would actually make a lot of people try to leave out some of the questions which they are not sure about, or try to lower the attempt rate just to mark those that they are absolutely sure about. So the paper setters do not want that. They want like students to attempt as many of the questions as possible, especially when in certain sections the cutoff is in single digit. So with that kind of single digit cutoff, you do not want people to actually just attempt 3-4 questions instead of actually attempting the full section as such. So with that in mind, do not remember that there is a small penalty for leaving many questions unattempted. Keep that also in mind while you are attempting. Now, again, there are 5 options, A, B, C, D, E. You have to choose of those 5 options. There is no theta type of questions, even parajumbles or any other kind of question. You have to choose options. There is no theta questions as such. Okay. So with that, let us take a look at each of the individual sections. So you have verbal ability and reading comprehension. You get 26 questions from that. You have decision making, you get 21 questions from that. Generally, they are 7 sets of 3 questions each. Then you have quantitative aptitude and data interpretation. You will get 1 to 2 sets of data interpretation based mostly on like tables or charts. From in recent years, mostly tables has come, but in earlier years, a lot of charts have come, especially special charts have also come. That has kind of reduced in the recent years, but again, basically in DI, you have to be very, very good at tables and charts, and if that is the case, then you will be doing well in this. This is not LR, this is DI. Okay, so that is 28 questions in quant aptitude and DI. GK is 25 questions. Again, all of these 25 questions should be completely attempted by you because there is no negative marking. Essay, you will be given 2 choices of the essays. You will have to write 1 essay of the 2. Your essay will actually be evaluated during the interview process. Till then, it is not going to be read. It is not used for the shortlisting purposes. So remember, this is the general section. You have 190 minutes, 10 minutes specifically for this, 180 minutes for this, which you can distribute as whatever way you want. Generally, what I do is that GK, I go off through it very quickly because there is no second guessing in GK. Either you know the answer, you don't know the answer. Decision making, I take some time to actually think and check the think about the answer for decision making. Verbal ability and RC is my strength, so I try to reduce the time that I spend over there. And whatever leftover time that I have some additional time when I have considered all of these sections, that I fully focus on quantitative aptitude, because generally when you have a very, very high score, it generally will come from this particular section because your accuracy rate in this particular section can be very high. So what the strategy that has worked for me for the last few years, and generally have come, I think, nearly first, or they don't release who is first or not. But generally, I have done fairly well in that, just using the strategy that finish off GK, finish off verbal ability and RC. So the strategy that has worked for me for the last few years, and I have come, I think, either first or second for the last couple of years at least, is basically finishing off general knowledge questions, finishing off verbal ability and reading comprehension, giving time to decision making section so that I read and carefully consider each question, and then putting all the time that I have, as much as time that I have in solving quantitative aptitude. Try to get all 28 questions done. Most of your marks are going to come from this particular section. There will be sectional cutoffs, but when you have the overall cutoff to clear, the marks that you get from here will be the ones that will help you to clear the overall cutoff. So that is the strategy that has worked for me fairly well till now. Essentially what happens is that GK, either you know the answer, you don't know the answer, you can't really help much with it. Again, that is not the place where you will be, that will actually be considered for like shortlisting or even your percentile. Your percentile basically comes from the first 3 sections. So over here also, just remember that verbal ability and reading comprehension, you might have a fairly decent accuracy rate, but the accuracy rate will be, even when it is good, it is going to be around 80%. Decision making accuracy rates are generally around 50%. They are fairly poor accuracy rates in decision making. Even for the best students, You can't really predict. If it's your day, you might have a high accuracy rate. If it's not your day, you might have a low accuracy rate. But in quantitative aptitude, you know that you can aim for like 90 to 100% accuracy rate. So with that, you should always remember that as much time as possible, try to leave it to the quantitative aptitude and DI section. Try to get as many questions correct from this as possible, because your overall score and your overall percentile cutoff will be helped greatly by a score over here. This will not help you that much as the quant aptitude score will help you. So with that is the strategy that I kept in mind whenever I'm attempting for me to get from like 99 percentile to like 99.99 percentile, it's just quantitative aptitude. Okay, so let's take a look at each of the sections. Verbal ability. So here, reading comprehensions, you will get 4 like CAT style reading comprehension sets. Generally, the passages can be slightly longer than CAT, and there will be 3 questions each, but generally the questions are easier. They are less involved, they are less subjective, they are less ambiguous. They are not completely straightforward, but they are not very ambiguous also. So generally those 12 questions are not that difficult to solve. Things that students generally struggle with is the poem RC. So basically in a poem RC, a poem will be given, and you will be asked to answer 2 questions based on the poem. Now, poems are not something I am very comfortable with, neither are most students that I know. In general, with poem RCs, there's a trick to solving these kind of questions. We'll be covering that in the concept video. But once you know exactly from experience how to answer questions of that type, how to actually think about those questions, then it is easy to solve. But if you are going in without any kind of preparation, poem RCs, you can directly expect these 2 questions to completely go over your head. So poem RCs is generally where people struggle. Normal RCs like passage text RCs are fairly doable. They will be actually slightly easier than CAT. The fill in the blanks will be easy questions to solve. They'll be like based on either like meaning of the word, vocabulary based, preposition based. So basically, if you have a good vocabulary, if you have good sense of grammar, you should find fill in the blanks questions fairly doable. Grammar is basically the questions that come. You have a few grammatical rule based questions that keep repeating, that is based on like figuring out subject verb agreement, tense agreement. So basic rules that you have to keep in mind while checking for grammar, like grammar and sentence correction. If you just do them, most of the times I've seen that the grammar questions tend to be repetitive in what they are asking in terms of the errors that they are asking about. So it is the grammar and sentence correction questions are not very difficult, but just you need to be like you should have a mental map of the rules that I have to check. Okay, first check, is the subject verb agreement correct? Check if there is any parallelism errors. Check if the tense agreement is correct. Check if the prepositions are correctly used. Check, just go through that checklist and you should be able to answer these questions without much difficulty. Parajumbles are slightly harder. I feel that in general, parajumbles from XAT are harder than the parajumbles from CAT. So parajumbles from XAT tend to have 5 sentences, and those sentences are also longer sentences. They are not contiguous sentences, basically meaning that they can be taken from anywhere in a particular passage. So the first sentence, the 5th sentence, the 7th sentence, 8th sentence, 12th sentence. So the sentences do not have any internal link between them. That is the first issue with that. Secondly, with 5 sentences, the difficulty slightly increases. Sometimes there can be even 6 sentences. So there's a slight increase in difficulty with parajumbles as such. But there is help also. The help is that you will be given options. So what I would suggest is try to read the sentences, try to understand the order of the sentences, and extensively use options. Options will help you understand whether something makes sense or not. So in case of parajumbles, especially in XAT, rely on options. They will be a better bet. They will be a more accurate bet than trying to unscramble the paragraph without the options. Okay. Now let's take a look at decision making. This is generally the section where most of the students falter. This is the section. Generally, like the cutoff is between like 5 to 7 marks. So you can understand that there are 21 marks to be had, but the cutoff is somewhere between 5 to 7 marks. You can understand this section is a difficult section just from this basic information. And I have been teaching that for a long time, but even I can't really tell what the answer will be, because these answers are extremely subjective in nature. I'll give you an example. For example, in XAT 2021, the exam that happened in 2022 Jan, There was a question about a person going and asking their professor that a student basically goes to the professor and says that one of the group members of the study group that they had formed had their parents had their father had passed away, so because of that they were not actually able to finish the group assignment on time, and they asked for an extension of the group assignment. Now you'd see a question like that, and the human response to that would basically be, yeah, the professor should grant extension on that. A death of a parent is a serious issue, and you should definitely give a grant and extension for a deadline of that. But the correct answer in that particular case was that the professor asked the student not to bring such personal things to them, or should not trouble them with these kind of things, and these kind of issues should be resolved within the group. Now, I would not agree with that, and it is a very subjective answer to give. Again, a professor who said it might actually think that that is how a manager is expected to behave, that their own internal issues or internal squabble should not reach the client or should not reach the customer, and they should handle things like that internally. And if that is the expectation, they would expect that even of the student. So now this is a very, this is a type of a question where you can argue both ways. There won't be any clear answer. There won't be any accurate answer that you can say for 100% accuracy, no, this should be the answer. The answer should be 7 or anything of that sort. You can argue, in a way, I can argue for all 5 answers as such. Sometimes, in most cases, in decision making, at least 2 answers are definitely wrong. But in most cases, you can argue for either of at least 2 answers as such. So, because of that, the accuracy rate over here is very, very low. Generally, extremely low. And in that case, mostly the sectional cutoffs are 5 to 7 marks. So, basically, your idea over here should be that if you have not completely not understood a set, try to leave that. Because partly because that negative mark will actually hurt you more than help you, and you need only 5 to 7 marks out of the 21 to actually go through. But you can't leave like a majority of half of the section also, because again the negative marking from unattempted questions will come in. So if you do not understand a set at all, if you feel that I have not understood at all what is going on, so try to leave a 3 questions set that way, but do not leave too many questions unattempted in that particular manner. As much as possible, I would suggest that wherever you feel that you have a good handle on the set, a good idea of what the set is requiring, try to answer that set. See, there will be different types of sets that are there. The strategy and operation sets are far more objective in nature. They are basically business decisions. Where should you open a branch? Where should you expand? What kind of input should you put? How should you save on cost? These are business decisions, and those kind of business decisions can be objective in nature. You can argue objectively that, you know what, of these 3 places, we should open a branch in this particular area, because either the cost outlay will be lesser, the risk involved will be lesser, there will be a higher chance of profitability, there will be a higher chance of success. You can argue objectively in those kind of scenarios. So generally, I would say that whenever you get a strategy or operations based set, try to solve them as much as possible. Ethical dilemma generally can also be solved safely. Just remember in ethical dilemmas that you should not take any kind of a stand which is unethical, in the sense that if it is printed in a newspaper, it would embarrass you. So if you lie, if you cheat, if you bully somebody, if you harass somebody, if that is actually printed in a newspaper, you would know that, no, that is wrong. You know internally, whenever there is an ethical dilemma, that some actions you might feel are justified, but if they are widely known, it would cause you personal embarrassment. So based on that basic barometer also, I find ethical dilemma generally to be doable. Those sets are doable, and I would suggest that even do these kind of sets. The ones that I find most unreliable are behavioral and personal decisions. Basically, like personal decisions about whether the student should be given an extension or not, based on whether you should call customer service or not. Very, very kind of personal and behavioral kind of sets, which is very difficult to justify whether they are right or not. Again, HR and organizational policy sets, generally because there is a lot of research done on organizational policy, on HR policies. There is some amount of agreement about what is the right decision to be taken in each kind of scenario. Whether it is harassment cases, whether it is insubordination cases, there is generally some agreement on how to tackle those issues. So if you consider these first 3 sets, they are not that unreliable, but these kind of sets tend to be unreliable. So if you are someone who struggles to clear the cutoff in decision making, and you won't be alone in that particular area, many people will struggle to clear the cutoff in decision making. Just remember that try to optimize which sets you actually attempt. Try to choose the right sets and strategically choose to leave out certain sets which you have no idea about. Okay, we'll be going deep diving into decision making. We'll be covering each type of set extensively with examples, with what you should keep in mind, the frameworks you should keep in mind. Everything will be done. So do not worry about decision making. But always remember, it's a low bar you have to clear, but essentially that low bar also that you have to clear, you have to clear through practice and effort. Now let's come to quantitative ability. Generally, this section is easier than CAT. It's easier to do in many ways because the arithmetic questions are easier, the geometry questions are easier, the algebra questions are definitely easier. But one of the issues that I faced with the quantitative ability section in XAT is, firstly, this is something that I face but not a lot of students face, is that they give you very limited space to actually solve the questions. In one of my XAT exams, I was given only one A4 size paper to actually solve, and that basically restricts how much space you can take to solve questions. You might have to do a little bit of mental math just because you do not have the place to solve. Also, it hampers your ability to solve data interpretation questions, especially where you have to write out tables. So always keep in mind how much space you are using while solving also. Generally, this is not faced by all students. Some exam centers are fairly good in giving proper booklets, but some exam centers also give just one A4 size paper. So just think of that also while preparing. Try to do as many questions mentally as possible before the start while preparing for the exam. One more thing that you have to remember is that there are certain parts to this particular section which are not covered in CAT. So if you're coming from CAT, what extra things do you have to do? Probability, permutations and combinations is far more extensively covered in XAT than it is done in CAT, especially advanced probability is there. Secondly, trigonometry, trigonometric identities are never asked in CAT, but they are asked in XAT. You need to know trigonometric identities. Same with heights and distances question. You can expect at least one heights and distances question in XAT. At the very minimum, at least one heights and distances question. One more thing that often comes in XAT but is not part of CAT is basically finding out mean, median, mode and standard deviation. You just need to know the formulas and how to calculate each of these. Standard deviation is generally not that often asked, but it can be asked as such. So you should at least know the formula and how to calculate standard deviation. Data interpretation is generally tables and charts. So it's much easier than the DILR section. This is not like the DILR section of CAT. There is no LR, and even the DIs are not that logically intensive. The DIs are also straightforward calculation intensive. So with that, with this, I generally would have given you a weightage of how many arithmetic, how many geometry, but what we have seen is that the number of arithmetic questions varies from year to year. In I think XAT 2021, there were 7 questions, XAT 2022, only 2 questions. So there's a wide range of variance between the different sections and weightage, but the level would be slightly easier than CAT. So if you are prepared for CAT, this should not pose much of a problem. Focus on these areas and focus on preparing for data interpretations, especially calculation intensive data interpretation, of writing down tables, calculating through tables, quickly doing mental calculations. You should try to brush up on that just before that. Okay. Now let's get to the we will be covering essay writing separately. How to write the essays, I'll explain through the video specifically focused on essay writing. In this, basically, I'll just explain how to use the course. A lot of students who have already taken Krakows course know exactly how the daily schedule works, how the day-to-day courses work. But in case you don't know, what we try to do is basically we try to give you a daily schedule that you just have to follow. Our endeavor is that our students should not have to spend a lot of time thinking what they should do today. They should know exactly what to do today at the start of the day. So in the morning, you will get an email saying that you have to watch this video, you have to take this test, you have to watch this video, you have to take this test, you have to practice these many questions, you have to take this mock. Everything is given to you every morning in the mail, or you can just get to our website and you will see a list of tasks that you have to do. Just complete the tasks every single day. And we have basically distributed the syllabus as evenly as possible over the length of the course, so that you will be able to cover the course in proper time with proper practice, and all concept coverage will be there, all practice coverage will be there. So you don't have to spend that time thinking, what should I work on today? That's a waste of time, right? So to save you time, we just tell you exactly that do this, do this, do this, do this. And if you just stick to the schedule, you will have ample practice and full concept coverage. Now, one thing that I would actually stress on is that we have 5 ZAT mocks. I want to make sure that all of you actually take the ZAT mocks at regular intervals. Do not try to take it in January itself, that all 5 mocks I'll just do in January when all the course completion has been done. Do not do that. At least at the very start, in like after 1 week or so of the ZAT course, take at least one ZAT mock. And the reason for that is that it gives you an idea of the difficulty level. Without having any idea of the difficulty level, it will be difficult to know whether you are at par or you need more help, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. All of that information is extremely important early on in the course. So then what happens is that if you know that, okay, I'm struggling with the decision making section, you can start practicing from the study room for decision making. Basically, in addition to the course, we also want you to practice from the study room, and that practice from the study room should be based on which topics are you lagging in. So if you are lagging in particular topics, you can go back to that particular topic in study room. Say that I can't do profit and loss questions. You can take topic tests from that just to cover up as such. But if you leave all your mocks for the last week or so, there isn't enough time to actually address issues. There isn't enough time to improve on issues as such. So try to take the mocks, at least 2 mocks. You have enough time to reflect and understand, okay, what should be done, how should we improve as such. So try to take the mocks at periodic intervals rather than keeping all of them for the end of the course. So with that, I end today's video. I hope to see you guys regularly use the course. Make full use of every single video. Make sure that you learn every single thing that is in addition to whatever is like additional to CAT. Pay special attention to it, practice it thoroughly so that you know that you can definitely do that. That would be the distinction between you and an average MBA entrance student who has just gone in with CAT preparation. So make sure that you do every single thing that is there in the ZAT course, every single daily task, and I'm pretty sure each one of you will actually CAT ZAT. So thank you for tuning in.